On this week's episode of the WNP podcast, is Dallas Turner really a top 5 player in the class? Stay tuned. Episode 185 of the We're Not Professionals podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mitchelson, and joining me today, as always, my co-host, Chase Crawshaw. Chase, how are you on this lovely Monday evening?
I am doing swell. Thank you for asking. It's been a pretty lax day for me. Nothing too crazy going on. Just a couple phone calls. Just a quick errand. Decent weather outside. So it's a pretty solid day overall. How about you?
It's not too bad. Not very busy at all because my main 3 accounts for my job is the big 3 in the motor company, and they all had the day off. So I think I had a total of 8 emails today. Yep. I think they get the Friday and the Monday off around Easter. So
That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. But hope you all had a great Easter. Chase, how was your Easter?
My actual Easter day was quite uneventful. Me and my family got together the night before. So on Easter Sunday, I think I sat and watched football film and played MLB The Show for like the combined 11 hours.
Hey, it's not always a bad thing.
No.
I mean, you get a little relaxation, It's a good time. My Easter Sunday was pretty chill as well. Hit the old morning church, then had dinner at like 2:30, and then just didn't really do anything the rest of the day. So it was pretty chill. Got to watch Michigan State hockey lose to Michigan hockey, which hurt a little bit. Can't lie. But the best part about it is all the Michigan people at my work today were asking me about it, and I got to tell them, hey, at least Sparty actually gets to lift a trophy this year, unlike Michigan hockey, because we know they're going to get absolutely pummeled by Boston College. But, is what it is. Today we are going to be talking.
Mike.
Yeah, please tell me.
Did you specify Michigan or Michigan hockey? Because Michigan did indeed lift a trophy about 2 months ago.
I specified Michigan hockey. But
3 months ago, I guess.
Michigan football is not going to see any success for probably another 10, 20 years now that Harbaugh's gone and the cheating scandal is going to absolutely bury him. So,
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking about edge rankings for this upcoming draft class. It's going to be a good one. And not much news out there today. So Chase and I decided that we'd brag a little bit about our trip coming up. We're going to Indianapolis. And, Chase, I didn't really realize that rides haven't been determined. I know I've been the one driving for a while, but you want to leave a little bit earlier on Saturday, and apparently we don't have a driver for you guys, so you'll have to figure that out. But regardless, it should be a fun weekend. We got a nice Airbnb, little hot tub action. Gonna go see Morgan Wallen. It's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, I don't really know what. Oh, geez, excuse me. I don't know what what they're gonna want to do here. Because in terms of splitting up the drive, go 2 and 2 on the way down. So on the way down, somebody has some company, nobody has to sit in the back seat. But I feel like the default would be me driving, and just because I got more space in the car, I'm just used to driving, whatever. But that would leave, it would leave a weird duo in one of the 2 cars. I wouldn't be the end of the world, but so I feel like it's default that the other 2 are just going to drive together. I don't know. Nonetheless, we'll see. But I'm looking forward to this very heavily. I've been looking forward to this now for about the last couple of months, especially now the last couple of weeks too. Once I've realized that this is actually happening, it's actually coming pretty quick. We've had our bookings for our Airbnb, all that jazz. I'm very excited. It should be a good time.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. And I've been building up my country playlist. Little Morgan Wallen, little Luke Combs, little Bailey Zimmerman, obviously Noah Kahan, got some other guys in there, so it's gonna be a fun ride. Heading down, a little country music, see a little country music live. It's gonna be a good time. But Chase, let's talk about this draft class and specifically the edge class. before we get into our rankings, we are doing our top 8. I want to know your thoughts overall on the class, because I think I've got a little different thought process than I did coming into the actual film. But, thoughts change, especially after we see the film. So kind of curious where you're sitting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like relatively good overall. The last few years or so, there's been some pretty high level edges in the last few classes. And there's still a couple guys that are definitely highly touted. One guy that kind of stands a little bit above the rest, in my opinion. But I still do have a total of 3 guys in the first round, and then I think it's 3 more guys in the second round as well. So I've got a pretty decent, I guess ranked class. But I do remember a couple years ago, like there were 8, 9, 10 edges that I was having in the first 2 rounds. So I guess theoretically compared to the last couple years, it might be down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I do have similar amount of players in the first and second round, but I think where we actually have them ranked in those rounds, I'll be a bit lower than you are. Definitely thought this edge class was a little bit better. And personally, I thought that there was 1 or at least 2 guys that could come out right away, be like defensive rookie of the year. And I mean, there's still that potential, but right now I'm kind of leaning more towards the corner class and even potentially the defensive tackles that are better overall than, some of these edge players. So there are some good players, and we'll talk about them here, but just wasn't as impressed as I thought I was going to be.
Sure, I can get that. There's a certain guy, which I've still got him in the first round, but I remember the hype being a little bit higher for him coming into the year. And I still think he's good, someone that's still going to come in and be an immediate guy, but I was definitely expecting a bit more from him, I guess.
Interesting. All right, well, let's get to it. Let's start with your number 1 edge in the class.
So my number 1 in the edge of the class, who I think is, I don't know if to say safely above the rest, but I've got him as someone who I would take in the top half of the first round. Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. He is. He's a pretty diverse edge. He's 6'5", 259 at that size, but he's still someone who's going to line up more in that 3-4 offensive or outside linebacker, scheme. He is not necessarily an off-ball linebacker, but he's got some skills in that game on top of being a dominant pass rusher. Super strong. He's got athleticism. He's got a good size combo for it. I mean, he sheds blocks. He's incredibly smart. He's useful in the run game. I mean, he's got the total package. I mean, his moves are all pretty developed. I mean, like he's got the rush moves. He's got the bull rush. He's got the spin move. Like he's got everything that you are that you're looking for. And really, it's kind of the same thing as to talk about with a lot of the higher end guys in this draft class across position groups. It's all about just continuing to kind of refine the technique and refine those skills, because the whole cupboard of traits are there for him to work with.
Yeah, I've got Laiatu Latu as my number 2 edge in the class. He sits at the bottom of my first round. And just before we get into kind of that overall, my top 3 guys who I all have in the first round, they're all at the bottom of the first round. So wasn't super impressed by there was some impressive stuff from all 3 of the top guys, in my opinion. But I think there's obvious flaws in all of their games. So that's kind of where I sit, why they're a little bit lower than, past classes. But Laiatu Latu, yeah, I mean, you talked about it. He's got a great speed rush, and he's got great ability to stop the run, be able to stuff that. I think that his power rush game is a little bit lacking, especially compared to his size. And then he's got pretty short arms as well for an edge, which can be a little bit strugglesome, because I think it was the game against, I want to say LSU, but I might be wrong there, where he just kind of got locked down a little bit. And I noticed that there were some times where if he doesn't get his first move off, he can kind of get stuck at times. And then also you don't like to see a 24% missed tackle rate. So that's not great. It's one of the worst in the class. There's another guy in the top 3 here who is sitting similar for missed tackle rate, which you never want to see. But He's going to be a very productive pass rusher up front, but I think there is the potential for some games where he kind of disappears a little bit, kind of like a Trey Hendrickson. Like, he's going to have pressures all the time, but when it comes to actual sack production, I think most of it's going to come from maybe 70% of his games rather than, spanning across a whole average season.
So the sack number, I mean, obviously sacks are huge and they help you win football games, but it's just this is just a general term for across the board. The sacks aren't necessarily the number to get completely hung up on. Pressures are really should be the more defining tool for an edge rusher, just because there are different style edge rushers. Like there's going to be the speed finesse guys that are going to get to the quarterback more consistently than the power guys, just because they're going to be able to get there quicker. But the power guys are the ones that they kind of strike a little more fear, because once they, if they destroy an offensive tackle, then it's like, oh boy, here comes this massive mammoth of a human being. I mean, I got to get rid of this. So shouldn't all necessarily be about sack numbers for these guys in general. So when people are starting to do their research, looking at stats for these guys, I don't want you to see, oh, he had this sacks or he only had this sacks, blah, blah, blah. He's not going to be so good. It's a lot more than that. But all said and done, a lot of what you are saying is fair. I just think he's a little more developed with his power than you do. Again, there's obviously room to improve everywhere. Like, he can still take it all to the next level, but I think that he generates a little more power than you're saying he does.
Yeah, and Leatu Latu, he finished number 1 in the country with pressures, so obviously he did very well there. So let's get to my number 1. That's going to be Jared Verse out of Florida State, and this guy is like a barely a tick above Leatu Latu in my grades. Like, let me actually get my actual grades for you. So first round ends at 6.00. Jared Verse is a 6.07. Leatu Latu is a 6.069. So literally right next to each other. But I had Jared Verse just slightly above. I actually think Jared Verse is probably the smartest edge player in this class. Just the way he utilizes his angles. This guy maximizes his strengths in his game by using these crazy angles. And the one player that I'll compare him to in a second also uses these crazy angles. He's not super bendy. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he gets the job done and gets a ton of pressures, gets the sacks, because he uses these crazy angles to help him use that strength that he has, use that those power moves and that leverage, all that. So I really like Jared Verse and how he does that. I think he's got the best bull rush in the whole class. He's got great power, just allows him to be a better finesse rusher as well. He has amazing burst, and now I don't think, the top end speed is going to be as fast as a Chop Robinson or a Dallas Turner, but the burst off the line is terrific, and he's got the acceleration and speed enough to chase down the screen passes or your tight ends, anything like that. I think Verse is a disruptive yet inconsistent run stopper. There's times where he absolutely blows up a play, and then there's times where he kind of gets bullied around a little bit. But my biggest problem with Verse is going to be his lack of bend. That's something I'm really big on with my edges. I think the top guys in the country and in the NFL are these guys that are just freaky athletes that can bend around corners like no other. So Verse, he lacks a little bit there. But the guy I want to compare him to, a little bit smaller, obviously, but Aiden Hutchinson. I think Hutchinson does very similar things to Jared Verse. He lines up way outside the tackle at times. He's a guy that's going to win more with, power, speed to power to speed, switching it up, doing a spin move here and there. But this is a guy who uses his smarts rather than his pure athleticism. And I think that's why he eventually resulted going number 2 instead of number 1, because everyone was just obsessed with Trayvon Walker and his insane athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is a very valid analysis. I have Jared Verse coming in at number 2, and he is the guy I was mentioning that I thought he was going to be a little higher, because there was some talk that, Jared Verse is going to be, a top 10 pick potentially, in the summer coming in. And I still first round guy, bottom half the first round. So, like, you're still going to obviously get a lot of talent out of him, get a lot of production. But I pretty much down to a T, a lot of what you're saying is kind of what I have in my notes. With him being, his size, his technique, he's going to be somebody who is more of that, 4-3 edge rusher. So the run game is going to be a little more important in terms of, helping him be a more effective player. Because he's going to be lining up a lot more in the end. So he does need to develop that run game to make sure he's on the field more consistently and just do that at a better rate. So that's, that's where I think his biggest flaws. I think that's what's holding him back in the first round. But yeah, everything else, damn near like do a T what I agree with.
And now I think we'll be moving to the same guy at number 3. But I was talking to my cousin about this, and if you don't know, the Locker Room podcast, my cousin, he does his own podcast, does his own rankings. But him and I were going back and forth, and I was telling him, look, Bengals got to pick at 18. If for some reason all 3 of these guys are at pick 18, but so is Byron Murphy, so is Amarius Mims, I would actually be a little bit upset if they went one of these guys over the likes of Amarius Mims or Byron Murphy. That's just how much I like the other two, as well as, how a little bit underwhelmed I was with the class as a whole.
Interesting. I mean, I guess looking at my rankings, it's kind of fair. Like, I'm in a relatively sort of like they're all ranked super close. So like, in my opinion, with my rankings are like it's kind of you can't go wrong. I mean, either way, you're going to be fine. So do you want me to introduce my number 3 guy here, or do you want to take the lead?
Please go ahead.
So my number 3, final player ranked in the first round is Dallas Turner. Are you in the same boat here?
I sure am.
Yeah. Okay. Figured as much. I mean, Dallas Turner, he is kind of as mentioned. He's like you kind of. I believe it was what you're talking about first there, right? Comparing the kind of the speed, like he's a burner of an edge. I mean, ended up testing a 4.46 at the combine. He's explosive. His 10-yard, his vertical were both 97th percentile. His broad was 94th percentile. I mean, he's got that just pure athletic ability combined with a solid frame at 6'3", 247 for someone who's going to be playing a little bit off ball. Like he's got a really really nice just combination of everything. I being that 3-4 outside linebacker. When it does come to coverage and he has to kind of go cover a running back on a flat route or whatever, he does a very good job at doing that. He can take away space, he can keep up, he can chase an offensive player down the field. If they happen to cut through a gap, like he's got enough speed and enough athleticism to do that. So as long as he goes to a team who's running that scheme and they're willing to kind of use him everywhere, I mean, you're going to have a ton of success because he is going to help you in the pass game, of course, since he's an edge. That's kind of a specialty, but he's going to be decent in coverage. He's going to help out in the run game. He's got a full arsenal of moves. It's just another thing where he just needs to take it all kind of to the next level, just be a little more consistent, develop that technique a little more. But he is someone that can have a pretty decent ceiling if he can take that all to the next level just because of that athletic ability.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's probably the second best athlete in this class, and we'll talk about the first best coming up here pretty soon. But I think Dallas Turner, explosive athlete, like you mentioned, and when it comes to his coverage abilities, I mean, they were head and shoulders above the rest of the guys here. I mean, he's just so natural when it comes to going out, covering a tight end, covering that screen. But the big thing is obviously he doesn't have the most refined pass rush moveset. I think he also lacks some bend. Like if this guy had some elite bend in his game, then he could potentially be sitting, top 5, top 10 talent in this class, where I think a lot of people are actually ranking him right now, which surprises me a little bit. I see a lot of mock drafts of him going top 8, going to the Falcons there, but this is a guy who just lacks a little bit of that bend. He doesn't have the best pass rush moveset as of right now, and he also had a 22% missed tackle rate this past season. So again, just brutal. You don't want to see that. But overall, I mean, he's a young player, and he'll be able to refine his game. But will he be able to turn into that true number 1, that absolute monster? I don't know if he will. That's why I've got him here.
I think it's certainly doable, especially if that the power aspect of the game continues to improve. His like that's between his is his finesse and power. The power is what's going to need more improvement, in my opinion. There. So if he can and continue to improve that, just like his punches, his pure strength, his anchor, if all that improves, I think being a number one edge is certainly possible. Is he going to go out there and compete with Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt, whatever? I mean, like no, but he's still someone that if he ends up developing the right way and he's your number one pass rusher, I think teams could be pretty comfortable.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious. I don't know if you remember where you had Will Anderson, but is there a big gap even from your memory or anything?
Large,
Okay.
large, large. Will Anderson was like my number 3 player in the draft class.
Yeah, I think the same. So, like I mentioned, the sixes, six flat was where the end of my first round is. All those guys sitting between 607 and 605. Will Anderson was at a 705. So it was a pretty significant jump for me. And I even had Tyree Wilson, Nolan Smith, and BJ Ojolari over them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also none. I mean, minus Latu, I'm probably in a pretty similar boat. With like the number of edges I had above, exactly off the top of my head where they're at. I can't guarantee you, but it definitely is it's a very large difference. With the at least top few, like it definitely thins out quicker than it did in the last couple of years.
Yeah. All right, let's move to your number 4.
So my number 4 is a kid that kind of caught me off guard. Didn't really know a ton about him until I watched, but that would be Austin Booker out of Kansas. I'm not sure, if what your thoughts are on him and how much he might have done, but he's a very interesting scenario. It's the definition of boom or bust, in my opinion, is Austin Booker here. Only 505 college snaps. It's an incredibly small sample size, but he was extremely productive within that sample size. I mean, he's ultra efficient tackler. He was great at generating quarterback pressure. He's versatile enough to help in the run game. He does a great job reaching out while engaging a block, and he can get guys down with one arm. If the quarterback's scrambling, if the running back's coming up, like he does a great job, wrapping up. I mean, he's got power, he's got finesse, he's got probably the best speed to power pursuit in the class, in my opinion. I saw a comparison to Max Crosby for him somewhere, and I think that's perfect. He's someone who's going to be in that kind of similar boat. Probably he's looking at like a general consensus. I think right now is about a 3rd round pick, and I've got him pretty close to a 1st round pick. He's gonna be one of the first couple guys just outside that 1st round based on my ranks. And I mean, he's someone that like it's a guy that you got to take a chance on because he's just like he's just really good. He's just really talented. He's really raw. And he's really young. One of the younger guys in the draft class.
Yeah, I've got Austin Booker as my number 6 edge in the class. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Austin Booker myself, but I would say I line more closely to kind of the rest of people's thoughts and consensus, I should say, and that's just at the top of the 3rd round for me. I think he does a really nice job with his limited play time, does a nice job because he is that dynamic athlete. He does a great job transitioning speed to power. I think he's probably the best run stopper on the edge that we see in this class. But I think the big thing is that 1-year production. I think he also lacks some size, not talking height, but actual thickness. His lower body is actually quite thin, and I've seen him get pushed around at times. I think he also lacks that elite bend to be that number 1 edge in a class or, a top 5, top 10 edge in the NFL. I think that you really need that bend. And then I also saw multiple times when his first move didn't work, he kind of just got stuck. Didn't really have a second move teed up, ready to go. So while I do love a ton of the stuff that he's got in his game, and I think absolutely you take a shot on him, those are some of the negatives that I saw.
And my wholehearted honest opinion here, if he had more college snaps, which like guys develop at different rates, and so be it. Maybe he's a kid that would benefit in terms of his draft position playing another year of college, but I mean at the end of the day, he still should be a day 2 pick and is going to benefit from maybe getting to the pros earlier because he can definitely hack it right now. But if he had more reps and he had this similar production or at least a production path over those those extra reps, I think he'd be someone that the consensus is looking at significantly different. I think he'd be looking more like a 1st round grade type of guy just because they would have seen it more consistently. But you have a couple flaws there, which fine. I can understand, but the limited reps I think is what's really getting people just because like great seasons happen by players. Like there's guys that they have one great season and then they do nothing the rest of their career. So it's a valid concern to have, but I just see too much here to really have that potential success in the NFL. I mean, I this is a guy that I'm pretty happy to plant my flag on that I think is going to go on and be a very productive NFLer.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, the limited reps is something that I think a lot of people are taking into account, and I think it's because why? Why did he have those limited reps? I mean, he was on Minnesota and he did absolutely nothing. He didn't actually start doing anything until he got over to Kansas, which is that it was it the scheme thing? Was it the coaching thing? What was it that didn't work out for him at Minnesota? And I think that's kind of where, people aren't thinking of it as, oh, he just didn't get his time. It was, why didn't he get his time? And I think that's why there's a lot of people that have him a little bit lower than you. But yeah, I mean, flashes are on the screen there. I mean, this guy's got the flashes, could become a high-end player, and we'll just have to wait and see. But let's get to my number 4. That's going to be Chop Robinson out of Penn State. I mean, you want to talk about another guy who doesn't really have all the reps and doesn't have the elite production in college. This is the guy, Chop Robinson. He doesn't have the great pass rush moveset yet. He hasn't been super disruptive in the run game, but what's one thing he does have? He has elite athleticism and he's got elite bend. And this is a guy where you look at your Hassan Reddicks, you look at your Nolan Smiths. If you get the right guy to coach him, I think this guy can be an absolute dynamo at the position. He adds the speed and burst the way that Turner does, but adds way more bend. I think he's a raw prospect right now, but the flashes he has shown should have any team excited. He has an amazing release and overwhelming first couple of steps that will wreck any slow-footed tackles. And that scares me if he potentially could go to like the Ravens, because the Bengals, their 2 tackles are like 6'8", 360 pounds. Not exactly the fastest moving fellas, so that could be a player that could absolutely wreck those 2 tackles. But this one, all on athleticism. He's a second-round pick for me. Doesn't get into that first round by any means. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be dominant, year one. He's going to take a couple of years, but if he turns into a guy that can give you 12 to 15 sacks, I think teams will be very happy about that.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said there. He comes in as my number 6 edge, but that still is a second-round pick. It's an end of second-round pick for me, but what you're saying is a lot of what I have as well. It is a guy who is a just dominant athlete, and that's kind of how he's succeeding right now. The skill set it needs work. It's not technical, it's not refined. Like he's going to continue. He's going to need to continue to improve on that, and he's going to have a lot of time. He's a young player going into the league. Edge rushers, they have some longevity in the NFL nowadays, especially. So there's a lot of time to work on that, and having that athletic ability and having production, like you did at that level. It wasn't anything super crazy, but it shows enough signs of life that with that athletic ability, it can certainly happen. But alone his speed and burst, even like that's where he's having that success right now. Like even without any super refined rush moves, he's still blowing by blockers. He's still embarrassing offensive linemen just because like it is just so hard to maintain that. So if he could just continues to refine that ability, just like continue to refine the tackling ability, his block shedding, all that. As long as he just keeps on developing, I mean, it's a guy that has Pro Bowl potential 100%. But like you said, it's not going to be a year one thing. It's going to be something you see more year 2, year 3 into that second contract.
Yeah, and he's going to be one of those players where if your team drafts him, you're going to be really excited about it. You might not get to have that excitement pay off right away, but just having that type of athlete in the room is going to be a fun time for your team. But let's move on. We both talked about our 4 and 6, interesting enough. So let's get to number 5.
Yeah, that is interesting. So my number 5, I have Adisa Isaac. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Adisa. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you know for sure. But out of Penn State, another guy who obviously is in the second round. If Chop Robinson's my 6th in the second round, but he impressed me. Not a guy that I really knew like much about, but I liked a lot of what I saw in film. Another guy who I think he's pretty scheme versatile. I think personally, I would like to use him a little more in a 4-3. Just have him have his hand down in the dirt a little bit more. I think he can do well in the end. But if you're going to use him in that 3-4 more of the outside linebacker skill set, I think he's going to do just fine there too. he's just got a really nice combination of patience and urgency. So he's, when he's going one on one with an offensive tackle, he's going to burst off the line. He's going to try to beat him with his spin move, his power. He's going to try to beat him with his moves. But at the same time, in certain schemes, certain plays, he's going to force himself to be a little more patient, and he's going to wait for the hole, and then he's going to burst through that hole. And that's where he's had a lot of his success in terms of his sack numbers, where it was kind of doing that. And I can't remember which game it was that I was watching, but he did exactly that, and he was patient. I think it was a 2 sack game. He had a lot of patience, and he just bursted through the line and just was demolishing the quarterback, was causing a lot of pressures, and I really really liked it a lot. I really see it as being something that's super translatable. Just having that that patience, that level of IQ, and letting a play kind of develop before he attacks. And I don't know if develop's the right word I want to use, but he analyzes pretty quickly what's about, what's happening in that play, and then he can go and he can kind of make a play from there. But I liked a lot of what Isaac does. I think he's someone that he should come in and maybe not necessarily be a sack monster year one, but come in and make an impact, and then continue to refine his abilities, and another year two type guy.
Yeah, and I think Isaac is one of those guys who is going to be a little bit better off the jump, but may not have the potential ceiling that some other guys have. I actually have Isaac coming in at my number 10 edge, and he
Oh
just
wow.
kind of reminds me of a little bit smaller Jordan Willis, who was drafted by the Bengals out of Kansas State a little while ago. Was a big fan of Jordan Willis coming out, had some great tape like Isaac does, but one of the things that just really scares me away is he just seems like such a stiff athlete. He doesn't seem super fluid to me. He doesn't have some crazy bend by any means. I think he could add some more to his pass rush repertoire. I think he also overextends a little bit when he is doing his bull rush, to the point where he just blows by the quarterback and gets kind of stuck behind him. So there's just some little things, but I think the big one for me, the reason why he's down here, is he just seems too stiff of an athlete for me.
I can understand, his, I don't know if the limit athletically is the right word I use, but I understand, where your thoughts and concerns are coming from, but it's not enough for me to, have much of a concern, much of a drawback, because it's not like he's someone who completely lacks athleticism. Like he's still has enough of it to get the job done. He's still going to be able to make an impact. And, there's plenty of guys with his frame, his athletic profile, his skill set that go on and have success in the NFL. So I'm not super concerned about the athletic ability, but if he was a higher level athlete, then he would be someone who's obviously significantly higher in draft boards.
Right, absolutely. All right, let's talk about my number 5, and that's going to be Jonah Ellis out of Utah. This guy's coming in a little bit smaller at 6'2", 248, but this is a guy who's got a football bloodline. I mean, 3 of his brothers currently in the NFL. His dad was the coach, I think defensive coordinator or maybe edge coach for Utah. So he's just got a bloodline full of football. He's a super young player, which I like a lot. But the one thing I saw with Jonah is he seemed so committed to his craft. I mean, there were times where he just got absolutely crushed on one play doing, maybe he's doing a swim move, whatever it might be. The next play, he comes out and he changes it up completely. And he kind of adapts to, how are they beating my swim move? All right, let's change something up and get the swim move working. There's just little things that he does to his game to kind of, you see how he works his craft. He's getting better as he goes. So really like that out of him. I really liked his bull rush. He's got a nice cross chop, super flashy spin move, which I was a little bit shocked by. He's also very good in the run game, finding his target quickly, using his lateral quickness to get there. I think the big thing is where Jonah lacks in his size and athleticism. Obviously, only being 6'2", he's going to get pushed around a little bit. I think he's got good speed and acceleration, but when it comes to, that elite end speed and acceleration, he's not necessarily there. And then the bend and strength, not necessarily shining spots for him either. Kind of more of an average athlete, but doesn't look super stiff to me, and is able to, just work on his craft, be a good little grind it out type of player. And this is a guy who I've got at the end of my round 2.
Those exact flaws that you mentioned are the reason that I have him coming in at my number 9 edge, somebody who is, and early day 3 pick, someone who's kind of on that cusp between third and fourth round, but ends up in the fourth round. And ultimately, that size, it's going to make him a bit of a tweener between being someone who's better fit 4-4-3 or 3-4. Like you want bigger guys on the D line, but I think his skill set's maybe better off for that, to be honest. So like it's going to put him in a bit of a weird spot. But yeah, as you mentioned, that spin move, I mean, it's crazy. Like that's but that alone gave him quite a bit of a boost, like in his system, or like in my grading system, because I think that type of move can work against literally anybody. Like that's just, as long as he gets it off properly, it's so fast that like you don't have time to react, no matter how good you are. Like,
Yeah.
it really is mesmerizing, but you're not going to be able to always get it off at that exact speed every single time. So if he does it a little bit slower, then he's going to get stopped. And then if he only does it all game long, then eventually there's going to be a Justin Spade to stop that. But when he does pull it out, if used in the right way, I mean, he's going to have a lot of success getting to the quarterback that way. But other than that, like the power moves just aren't there yet in my eyes. I think he still needs a lot more improvement there in order to be someone who's used a little more. So with that lack of athleticism, with that size, kind of with the lack of power, he's kind of more of a situational rusher for me. Put him in on third downs, pair him with somebody who maybe has that power on one side and let him maybe exploit a less talented offensive tackle on the other side. If you use him that way, I think he can have some success there. But the beautiful thing about Jonah Ellis is I think he's someone who's going to be a pretty safe NFLer. At worst, being a rotational piece, but is also going to help out on special teams just because he's already shown some success at the college level, and he does have a strong work ethic, and he's willing to engage. Like, he can make tackles. He offers a lot of nice abilities that you're looking for in the special teams game. So at worst, he's someone who I think can have an NFL career just in that world alone.
Yeah, and he only just turned 21 earlier this year. So that's, I think, in February, actually. So a
Yeah.
really young player that is going to have that time to develop and grow. And I think he'll definitely be the best of all his brothers. His brothers, I think there was a 7th-round pick, and then 2 of them went undrafted. They've been bouncing back and forth between practice squad and not practice squad, but Jonah Ellis should definitely be the best one out of the 4.
Yeah, I didn't realize that there was 3 of them. I knew the one. I didn't realize that there was 3.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? All right, let's get to
Yeah.
our number, what is it, 7?
Yes, sir. Number 7. So my number 7 is
Oh,
a
boy.
name that is built to be a Detroit Lion.
Can I guess?
Marshall. Go ahead.
Marshawn Nealand.
Yeah, yes, sir. I mean, if that name doesn't scream Detroit Lion, I don't know what does. All in all, though, I do like a lot of what Marshawn Nealand has to offer. Somebody who comes in as a 3rd-round pick for me, but his size combined with his athleticism, it's actually pretty solid. I mean, he's a pretty hefty boy for an edge of 6'3", 267. That's a pretty decent size profile. But man, he's relentless and he's powerful. He does not quit on a play. He went to college as a tight end, ended up moving to defense, and I think he's trying to make up for lost time for him, not coming in as a defensive end. He gives his all on every single play. He's one of the hardest working guys that I've seen in all my film review. He never quits. Like, he truly is always, if he fails on a rep, he's still trying to figure out and finish that rep as strong as possible every single time. I can really admire that. And it's somebody who's going to have a lot of, or at least the potential to have a lot of success in the NFL, because he's going to be able to spend some time, or put in the correct time, I should say, really developing that game. But as of right now, he might not, he might not be the fastest, most pure athlete, but there's enough there where he can have some success, and combining with that power, I mean, he is someone that day one should be able to have some success, and I really think that the ceiling is very high just because of his pure work ethic.
What round do you have him in?
I am in the 3rd round.
3rd round, okay. And you think his ceiling's that high?
I do. I think he's, I think right now, like, he can come in and make an impact, not necessarily a, like, I don't see him being a double-digit sack guy, but like, I someone that, like, if you're going to use him, and you're going to be perfectly fine. But it's not necessarily, the ceiling's that high because of his athletic profile. The ceiling's high because this, that, whatever. It's because I think he does have a very strong knowledge for the game. Like he reacts very well, and because he just busts his ass so much. Like, he's someone that he's not going to get worse. I don't imagine him ever getting lazy. So like he can really only get better up until a certain age. Obviously, going to start declining. But he's someone that can only get better. I don't imagine a world where he gets worse as a young athlete still.
Gotcha. So you're talking about Jonah Ellis.
I mean, I think Jonah Ellis is in a pretty similar boat. I just see a day one impact and someone who's going to be more than just a rotational special teamer in Marshawn Nealon.
Yeah, so I got Marshawn Nealon as my edge 8. He does make my top 8 in this class. And I put it very, very quickly, very easy. He's a solid athlete that uses his natural leverage, only being 6'3", not always, that's not prototypical size for an edge. But when you're a power rusher, having that 6'3" size, a little bit more natural leverage just because of that, is a really nice thing to have. But Nealon does a nice job with his hands. I think he's a stout run defender, but he doesn't have incredible burst or athleticism, lacks pure speed and bend to be an elite pass rusher. That's why I have him down here at number 8. I do have a 3rd-round grade on him. I think he's a guy that I don't know where his ceiling is. I feel like his ceiling is when you actually look at sacks. I know we were just talking about it earlier. That's not always the thing you want to look at, but when you want to talk about your elite edge defenders, your guys that are, steals in the draft, you're going to be looking at sack numbers. I feel like 8 to maybe 10 would probably be his like max in a season. So that's why I kind of have him down here in the 3rd round.
So I think Marshawn Nealon's going to be more of a guy that coaches love than fans love because he's always going to, up that level of play and compete in practice because of that work ethic. And as you mentioned, the sack number might not be super high, but it's going to help teams in the long run because he is still disruptive and he still generates pressure. And it's going to be enough where someone can maybe get him cheaper because, he didn't have the 20 sack season, but he might have still had an impact of a guy, let's put it this way, we'll say a more finesse, speedier, more athletic guy might have a 16 sack season. He might have the same impact on the field as that guy with only 8 sacks, just because he is a lot more of a scary presence who can win at that power. So I think he's going to be somebody that coaches love a lot more than general consensus like fans do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get you there. I don't know if he's going to get as much play time to have that type of impact of a guy who potentially gets 16 sacks. I feel like, especially year 1, he's going to be more of a rotational piece for sure. And then can he build into that, 80% of plays per game type of guy? I hope so, because Marshawn Nealon's a good little player. And I think the big reason that, or one of the big reasons you're a big fan of him that you didn't mention, he's from the MAC.
Dude, Maction, baby. He is a good old Maction boy, Western Michigan. Grand Rapids, Michigan, too. So he's Michigan through and through. So how do you not love that? He's a Michigander. His last name's Nealon. I mean, he sounds like a Detroit Lion. If they don't address edge earlier on and, he's someone that's there in the 3rd round for him, even though he's not necessarily the, like kind of edge they're looking for, they need someone who can, maybe a little more speed to kind of pair with Hutch. I still like his talent enough where, and everything else is just so cool too that I'd be happy if the Lions picked him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's get to my number 7. This is actually the last guy I have on my board, and that's going to be Braylon Trice out of Washington. I expected a little bit more out of Braylon Trice. I can't lie to you. I got him here as a 3rd-round grade for me. And I think he does a good thing, or does a nice job at some things, and then obviously he's got his flaws, so let's go over that. I think Trice is an above-average athlete that was super proficient throughout his career. Trice was very disruptive in both the pass and run game by utilizing solid speed to power and using his hands effectively. I think the big boo-boo for him, though, is he just lacks finishing. When you finish first in the country in pressures, you finish first in the country in pass rush win rate, you should have more than 7 sacks. And, that is a big enough discrepancy right there to be first in pressures, first in pass rush win rate, and only 7 sacks. That's where you got to start to question, okay, some guys might not get those sack numbers, but they also don't have the top end pressures, top end pass rush win rate. So that really scared me off. Also, I felt like the angles weren't very good for him. He let the QB, let me see what it says here, letting the QB go or not being fast enough to be able to finish off some sacks in the backfield. I think he also had an issue keeping his eyes on the play. There were so many times where I saw it was literally just an RPO, your standard run pass option, and bro would just tackle the running back who doesn't have the ball, or he'd just tackle the quarterback and the running back was 5 yards past him already. Like, keep your eyes up. Keep your eyes on the ball, dude.
I love that you brought that up because that was going to be the number one point I brought up as well. Braylon Trice comes in as my number 8, so look at that. We don't have to talk about an extra guy, but comes in as a day 3 pick for me. Same exact boat. I remember coming into the year there was a lot more, but like I hype, I guess if that's right. We're spoken about him, but watching the film, like, yeah, it's just like it's fine. Like he's someone that I think that like he can help a team, but like it's not something that I'm drafting to like really go every rep for me. I mean, like he works his ass off. He doesn't quit. I'll give him that. But despite that, he doesn't make the right reads very often. I just say very often. Sorry, yeah, that's just disrespectful. But there's oftentimes he makes the wrong reads that leads to plays where he probably could have made more of an impact. He probably could have made a defensive stop, but instead, as you said, he might grab the running back instead of the quarterback on a pretty obvious, read option type play, and it's something that it just really bugs me. His run defense game, it's also only okay. I mean, that just it's not enough for him to really be looked at as okay. This is like going to be an every down type player too. Every down type defensive end, just because the run game is just it's all just fine. So we have a lot of similar thoughts on him. I think that the ceiling might be a little bit lower just because I don't know. I just don't think the talent's there as much as I just talked about Marshawn Nealon and his work ethic. I think Brilliant Trices might be similar, but it's just the talent. It's just not the same right now. Again, if you're drafting him to be kind of like your rotational piece in day 3, then good on you. But anything higher, I think it'd be the wrong move.
Yeah, and I'm just really happy that you didn't have. I mean, I'm not rooting against this guy for any reason, but I see a lot of hype around Chris Braswell out of Alabama, seeing him as a
Not a
top
fan.
5 guy on a lot of people's boards. And I agree. I'm just not a fan of him. He's a little bit lower. He doesn't even make day 1 or day 2 for me. But happy to see that because obviously with a lot of consensus having him as a top 5, top 6 guy, there could be, a little bit of that pressure coming. But, you and I sticking to our guns. We watched the film, baby, and we saw Chris Braswell, not necessarily that elite player.
No, we're honestly, like we can talk about him very briefly since we brought up the topic. I think it's another guy where, excuse me, I think it's another guy that maybe has more success as a special teamer in rotational. If you need to use him because you have an injury, like then so be it. But I would never want him to be like my guy by any means. Like I just don't see that upside. He can do everything all right, but like nothing more than all right. So that's why I just don't get it. But he does work hard, and he has enough of a profile that can translate to special teams. So I think that's where he's going to kind of make his money in the NFL if he ends up doing things the right way. I don't see a path where he becomes a consistent pass rusher for a team.
Yeah, and I swear to you, north of 80% of his plays that I saw, he had an average jump, connected with the tackle, and that was it. There was no, big movement, no huge run stuff, no like movement at all. He kind of just had and now that's not every time, obviously. I'm just saying, about 80% of his plays that I actually saw him, he would have an average jump, connect with the tackle, and that was it. So it's like, what am I getting here?
Yeah, I agree. They really just nothing that pops. And final note that I'm going to make about these guys, and we're going to talk a lot more about them in the linebacker class too. Special teams players, they're not. You don't want to take a guy who's going to be a special teamer in the first, second round. Someone like maybe if they're like an elite receiver, running back, and they're a punt returner, yeah, like that's a little different. That's not a special teamer. That's just a guy that plays special teams. But special teamers are very important in the NFL game, but guys that should more go in day 3. So someone like Braswell is someone that if you're taking him in day 3 to be a special teamer, then I think that's a good pick. And as I said, we're gonna talk more about linebackers coming up here in the next week. There's gonna be a lot more guys in that category too. So just don't look at me calling someone a special teamer as necessarily a knock on them. There's still a lot of value there, but it's just not going to be the same draft capital as someone who is true to that position.
For sure. All right, well, that's going to do it for the show. I want to thank you so much for coming out and giving it a listen. If you want to stay up to date with all that we do, you can follow us on Twitter at WNP Sports Pod. That's again on Twitter at WNP Sports Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could, please give us a like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to turn on notifications. YouTube will let you know when we have our next video releasing. And join us down in the comments. Let us know who your number one edge in the class is. Is it Dallas Turner? Or do you agree with Chase or I with either Leatu Latu or Jared Verse? Would love to hear that down below. If you are watching on a podcast platform, if you could please give us a follow and a 5-star rating, we'd absolutely love you for it. So thanks so much for coming out. And as always, we're not professionals.